Hey everyone, I'm Tom and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be wrapping up the month of September. And September was just an absolutely whirlwind of a month for me, from real life to the book stuff. Just all kinds of crazy stuff happened. I went on an absolutely epic vacation to Ireland for like 7 days. I got to, go all over the country. I got to read a bunch and also got to see my favorite football team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, defeat the Minnesota Vikings. And just like probably the absolutely best sporting event I've ever been to in my entire life. The atmosphere, the people around me, just everything was just, I don't know, just a super special thing there. Speaking of special, my fiance and I also decided and locked in a wedding venue for us, which is, that's super exciting. It's, next year, so it's a little whiles away, but, that is super exciting. And then I did read a whole bunch. There are definitely going to be changes to my TBR that I, thought what I was going to read, and some changes that we will talk about in this video as well. But let's go ahead and talk about what I actually did read and finish and all that fun stuff in the month of September. And first off, we are going to start with 3 short stories. These are all from Jenny Wirtz, and these are all from her Wars of Light and Shadow series. These are all books or short stories that you can read after finishing. Most of them are the first book, and there's one, I think, The Sundering Star, you're not supposed to read until you finish Warhost of Vastmark, which, depending on where you are, which edition you're reading, is either books 2 or 3, because sometimes that is combined with another book. But those short stories are The Decoy, and then we also have Reigns of Destiny, and then we have The Sundering Star. So those were all 3 short stories. So the first one I read was The Decoy, and this was probably my second favorite of the 3. And I'm going to try to just say this because this is probably what I could say for all 3 of them. I'm going to talk about The Sundering Star a little bit extra, but The Decoy, Reigns of Destiny, The Sundering Star, I think are all very nice pieces to have if you are really invested into the world of Aethera and Wars of Light and Shadow. I don't think that necessarily the first 2 are like 100% necessary reading. I really do think you should read The Sundering Star after you finish Warhost of Vastmark. However, I think it really changes how you're going to think about the series. So the first 2 are just kind of like nice little historic things that happen. I mean, they're very well done. The writing, as always, brilliant, all of that fun stuff. But The Sundering Star, I think, can recontextualize what you think about this series, the timeline that this story happens on, the things that happen. If you just pick this up and read it and then read Curse of the Mistwraith, you would think that these are 2 completely different series. And I won't say much more than that because I obviously don't want to spoil anything or anything like that. But The Sundering Star, I really do think just changes how I think this series might go, some things that could happen in it, and it just opens up like a whole new world of like theorizing for me as I move on to the next main book in this series, Grand Conspiracy. I've heard that book starts out crazy and everything, and I'm curious on, are we going to get elements from the Sundering Star sooner or later into the main series, or is it going to be something that's more in the background and we're going to just get little bits and pieces? And so it's the one of all of the short stories that I have read that really makes me think about the series differently. All of the short stories are very well done. I gave all of them 3 stars because they're short stories. That's normally what I do for a short story. And we're talking short, like 20 pages and less for most of these. And I don't know, I just found it to be extremely interesting how I can think about the series so differently from just reading, such a short work in The Sundering Star specifically. Like, it just does. And I think it's cool when an author, has built out this world. Like, people talk about world building all the time, and we hear about, like Malazan and the Cosmere as a whole, and the Wheel of Time. We hear about all these world buildings and everything. And I think Wars of Light and Shadow, to no one's surprise, if you have been invested in this series at all, is definitely one that is in that realm. The world building, that the history that has happened in this world that I'm only just starting to get to, makes me extremely excited to continue on with the series and really see what happens. So that is definitely something that I'm going to be continuing reading on. And yeah, I think if you are a fan of those books, you should definitely read those short stories at some point. I don't think you need to completely break your TBR for them. And if you're only going to read one, definitely The Sundering Star is the one that I think changes the most for the series. I also did get into a few comic books, and to start off with, this is probably my new favorite Superman comic, which I didn't think I would say after reading For All Seasons. But Superman Up in the Sky is just an absolutely spectacular comic that just really shows, I think, the character of Superman in the way that he should be done. Superman is a character that I think can be so boring to so many, because so many people don't really know the character, right? You've probably only watched the movies. I know comics aren't the most popular thing around here and everything, but I think as far as comics, this one does Superman the best, and it just shows like the effort and care and the emotion that Superman can have. He's not just this uber powerful being that can like beat anything by punching it harder, right? I mean, And there are stories where that is true. And yeah, he is this super, ultra powerful like being and all this stuff. But there's so much more to Superman than that. And I just think Tom King captures it so brilliantly here in Up in the Sky. And this is probably my new go-to, which not that I have too many, but like between this, All-Star Superman, and For All Seasons, like this is the one I would give to somebody and be like, this will be the comic that either if you don't like Superman after reading this, like you're just never going to like him, I think. But if you're like curious on Superman, Up in the Sky, you can just buy this one thing, read it, and it's just such a beautiful emotional story. So much emotional impact is just squeezed into these pages. If you go back to the weekly update I did, I forget which one it is off the top of my head, but I did like a little reading expert from this, and I think it just brilliantly shows like what is going on here with Superman. And yeah, just absolutely fantastic. Tom King, I think he's actually a little bit of a controversial figure in comics. I'm not like super into the comic world. Like, I mean, I read them, but like the universe of comics, I'm not super like familiar with and into, and like, but I have seen that like Tom King is maybe a little bit of a controversial figure. So I'm curious on if he has some runs that people don't like, or just what it is about him. Maybe I probably won't look into it because I just don't care enough to. But for me, he's just absolutely killing it, because he also wrote the other comic that I read this year, or this month, this year. I did read it this year, but that is Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. And this is another fantastic one. I forgot to say, so Superman Up in the Sky was a 5-star comic for me. I mean, just maybe my favorite comic I've ever read. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow is a 4-star for me. I really liked it. I think part of it is I don't have the same connection to Supergirl that I do with Superman. Like, Superman is my favorite. And I do think that this just isn't, I mean, like, this is still super good. I just don't think it hits the same highs that, like maybe my favorite comic of all time does. But this is apparently the Supergirl that the new DC universe is going to be based on. And that makes me so excited for what those movies are going to do and be, and what's going to happen. And once again, Tom King does just kind of get this like emotional level for some of these superheroes that I feel like is so important, because they're more than just like their powers. I think it's really easy for people who like comics, who get into comics, to just read them and like, it's almost like a Dragon Ball Z fight, which nothing wrong with that. I love Dragon Ball Z and all of that stuff, but I think there's just something more. If you can get to that emotional level of what like makes that character, click and everything, I think it really enhances the story and everything. And both of those comics do a great job of it. So either one of those, if one sounds a little bit more interesting, I guess in Supergirl, you're following her kind of help. It's a revenge story, really, but not for her. It's for somebody else. And then, yeah, so if that sounds interesting, either one of those are great. You can, like I said, you can just go on wherever and pick up those. You don't have to worry about finding some weird edition or anything that some comics have. And both are 100% worth the effort to read. Next up, we return to the novels. Those are the two comics that I finished this month. But coming back to novels, we have The Immortal Investigations by Michael Cronk, who is the book guy here on YouTube. And I don't think I've talked about this one too much on the channel yet, because obviously I was gone with vacation, didn't do a weekly update. And I had a good time with this. This was like a really fun, I don't want to call it a palate cleanser. I mean, it kind of is. And that's kind of even what I used it for, but it's more than that. Like, this is a good book. I had a good time with it. I gave it 3 stars. This is basically a cop escorts his friend on a date with a vampire, and then the story kind of goes from there. I thought there was really interesting world building. It is definitely like an urban fantasy kind of thing going on, and I really did have a good time with it. I definitely do have some gripes. So some of my gripes with it are, I think some of the themes that it's trying to like handle here, which is really like maybe like the patriarchy and like people being able to stand up for themselves and some things like that, are maybe a little heavy-handed, a little overdone, and really in your face, which like there are going to be some people who read this and are absolutely completely turned away from it immediately because of that. For me, it doesn't really bother me. I do think it was, like I said, just a little overdone, a little bit like there wasn't enough showing. It was a lot more just telling. And so I'm like, it's not that it's bad or anything like that. It's just there, and it's maybe a little bit more present on the page and said in a way than I would like. I'd like it to be, I don't know, sometimes it felt like this was a message trying to be told to me instead of something that was just happening a little bit naturally in the story. And I mean, everything like fit together well as far as those elements went, but like I'm definitely going to be continuing with the series. I think the world seems really interesting. I really like the characters. The characters are fun. There's a good humor in there, which humor can be so hit and miss for me. Like, sometimes humor just like ugh, I don't laugh. I don't think anything's funny. But actually, in the Immortal Investigations, I thought the humor was well done. The story is good. It reminded me a little bit of, I think I said this in my weekly update when I talked about this a little bit, was this reminds me a little bit of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where we can go from like these really, really serious moments where like something impactful is happening, but then go right back into like the silly, goofy campiness of the story in Buffy. And I got a little bit of that from the Immortal Investigations, which for me, somebody who really likes Buffy the Vampire Slayer, one of my favorite TV shows ever, like I think this like clicks really well for me. And so, like I said, especially I think this is his first novel, so like I expect the writing and some of those things that maybe are a little heavy-handed to be better, done as he continues to write more and everything as the series goes on. I'm very excited to continue on and read more in the series. So it's definitely going to be one that's on my radar, and I'm excited to continue. I don't think this is, the greatest like work of literature ever, but I do think it's definitely one that you should read. I think it's a lot of fun, especially if like the urban fantasy stuff is something you like. Like this is, I haven't read a whole lot of it, but I had a great time with it. Then next up, we have to talk about Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is book 2, and is it the Empyrean Cycle, I think is what it's called. And yeah, so this is, the book that follows up Fourth Wing. I didn't know how to feel about it going into it. I was worried, obviously, like I think saying cautiously optimistic maybe is being even too generous. I was pretty confident that I wouldn't like Iron Flame at all. I was pretty confident that Iron Flame would be maybe one of my least favorite books. I heard from some people that Iron Flame is worse than Fourth Wing, and you never know what's going to happen. And actually, I enjoyed Iron Flame way more than I thought I was going to. I had a really good time with it. 3 stars. I didn't think it was anything revolutionary or like some of the best stuff I've ever read, but I did definitely like it more than Fourth Wing. I thought it was way better done. I think the character development was better. I think we started to get some cool, interesting world building. Some cool magic stuff starts to happen. The dragons that are in this, I think the way they're in it is better, and I like more of the dragon stuff. But the biggest thing is the main character and her love interest spend so much of this book apart that I think it makes the book significantly better. My problem with this series so far has been, I think it is a pretty decent series. And then you get this weird toxic relationship romance stuff that goes on to it. I'm not even talking about like the smutty stuff. That's like a whole separate category. I'm talking about like the relationship itself is toxic, and it's exhausting to read. It's exhausting to like be in it with them. I think it's like the definition of like a horrible relationship where it's obsession. It's not love. It's this weird obsession stuff. And I really like when those two characters are together. I have like a significantly worse time with the book than when they're apart. And so that's hard when, you know, part of the, reason this series exists is because, it's like this romance thing that is happening. And I think the relationship itself is horribly toxic, and it grades on me every time that I have to listen to them like interact with each other. And I think one of the other problems is these characters are supposed to be in their 20s, and I think the main character for the most part feels the correct age when she's not with her love interest, and then when she is with the love interest she reverts to like a 15-16-year-old girl and like a messy like high school relationship before you have your frontal lobe like partially developed at all, right? And so that's just super super hard. I will also say that for the smut, like it's clearly not like for me, but I don't think it's all that well done either. I don't know. I'm thinking I haven't read like a whole lot of like smutty stuff, right? But I think back to like some of the stuff that happens in Empire of the Vampire, some of the stuff that happens there. I think Jay Kristoff does a way better job of it in those books than Rebecca Yarros does in this series, and this is like marketed as that. Now it's super explicit. There's plenty of the smut stuff that happens in here, so yeah, I just don't think it's like super well done if compared to some of the other stuff that I've read. But I don't know, maybe this is better than a lot of other stuff. So I don't know. Once again, I don't think it's really the smut stuff is written for me. I would love to know if you are a fan of the series, like how do you feel about the relationship? Is it as exhausting for you as it is for me? Is the smut like actually well done? Is that like I don't know. Like I said, not the targeted demographic for it. And then the other thing I want to say about this book is it is way too long. This book is split into 2 parts, and each part should have been its own book. Like there's no reason that this was one 30-hour long book when it could have been 2 15-hour books, to me at least. I think I'm trying to remember how long Iron Flame is, but I think it's closer to like that 15-hour mark on the audiobook than 30. And that's because this is 2 books like glued together for some reason. After like part 1 ends, and I'm like, that would have been a perfect ending, and we still have an entire part 2 of this book. And you know it's fine, whatever. I don't mind a long book, but it just felt like, wow, this was such a crescendo. This was such an end point. Why are we continuing on? And it just kind of like lulled you into this like new part, this new arc of this story. And I was just like, man, this really feels like it should have been, a second book. And I'm not the only one who said that. My fiance said the same thing to me because we're reading this together, and she said part one should have been its own book. And so I'm curious on like maybe what the third one is, Onyx Storm, like how that book is, and I don't know how long it is, so maybe it's shorter. And I don't know. That's just kind of my overall thoughts on Iron Flame. I will be continuing on. I will read Onyx Storm. I think that is the one that even people who really like the first two kind of really don't like. So I'm curious on what happens in there. I will say there are some good twists, like overall world building, character stuff. Like it's good. There are some like really good moments in it, and then I think those good moments are just dragged down by the relationship and the romance part of it. And I'm just like, there's like a pretty decent book hidden in here that just like gets dragged down by some of that other stuff. So yeah, once again, if you like Fourth Wing Iron Flame, I would love to know what you think about this book and everything. Maybe my fiance and I will do like a review for it, spoiler review, like we did for Fourth Wing here in a little bit. But yeah, if you had told me I'd be reading this and would be moving on to Onyx Storm or whatever, I wouldn't believe you. But here we are, and we're going to do it. And then that leaves me with the only other book that I finished in this month, and that is book 3 in Sun Eater, Demon in White. I've talked a lot about Sun Eater and Demon in White and everything here, so the quick version is I really, really liked this book. I liked it slightly less than Howling Dark, but this is still, one of my favorite books that I've read this year. The Sun Eater is just like an absolutely amazing series, and I'm so excited to get caught up, go to the gala, all that fun stuff, be a part of like the ending of this series. Demon in White, I think the ending is spectacular. There's so many moments. It's a long book, right? And so it almost felt like there were times where I was like, wow, so much has happened in this book. There's some really, really cool stuff that goes on in here. And yeah, I'm super excited to see what happens in Kingdoms of Death. That's currently what I'm reading or listening to right now. And man, yeah. And so that actually is going to bring me into my slight TBR change here. So originally I was going to move on from Iron Flame into the second book in the Empire of Salt trilogy. And with it already being October, and I still need to read Kingdom of Death, Ashes of Man, and Disquiet God. So that's 3 books by November, I think it's like 15th. I'm bumping that second book from Empire of Salt till I finish Kingdoms of Death and Ashes of Man at least, probably. And what I think is maybe going to happen here on the channel is I'm going to read Kingdoms of Death, read The Body because it's super short. I think that whichever one's shorter between The Shawshank Redemption and The Body, read that, go straight into Ashes of Man, and then probably go straight into Disquiet Gods, because those are, I mean, Kingdoms of Death is a little bit shorter than Demon in White, so I don't know. But basically, I'm just going to probably have to binge Sun Eater here so I can be caught up. So if you're tired of Sun Eater, if you're not really interested in Sun Eater, stick with me, I promise. We're almost done with it, but I think that is probably what's going to happen, around here as we continue on. So that is kind of like a little TBR update that I'm going to just throw in. Hopefully, maybe I can finish reading stuff a little bit faster. I still have a couple of days of vacation left, so we'll see what happens before I go back to work and get caught up on work, which normally takes away any extra reading time I would have had on these last couple of days of vacation before I go back. So you just keep that in mind. And so yeah, that is all of what I finished and read. I guess real quickly, I did technically start Grand Conspiracy, and by start I mean like I think I read the first page of this. So yeah, this is definitely going to be something that I do read. I physically read like in bed before I go to sleep, which I normally would never listen to in bed. So like it works out a little bit, but that I would love to also finish that, but it's not going to happen, I think, in October, unfortunately. So we'll see. And then I'm also still technically reading through the second compendium of Invincible as we go on. But this has to go back to the library soon, so I probably won't finish this. And then I don't know how long the hold is for it at the library. So I don't know when I'll be able to get back to it, unfortunately. So we'll see what goes on there. So yeah, that is all of what I read in September, did all of those fun things. So now quickly moving on to, did I watch anything in the month of September? No, I mean, I watched football. That is the one thing that I will always watch when football is on. But I haven't watched any TV. I haven't watched any movies or anything. Like on the plane, I either tried to sleep or listened to a podcast or a book. I actually listened, fun fact, I listened to like 7 hours worth of Iron Flame in one day on the plane, on the second plane, and then like I finished it at home. So like I binged Iron Flame to make sure I finished it in September so I could move on to the Kingdom of Death, which was a lot of Iron Flame, a lot of Violet there in that book. But but watched, nothing at all, which is, whatever. When you have as many hobbies and stuff as I do, you got to cut stuff out every now and again. So that's what happened there. And then just some other places I have been in and around YouTube. I'm sure I'm forgetting one or two things. My brain is still a little scrambled, a little jet lagged from coming back. I was in Dublin yesterday, to give you an idea of like filming and stuff. So I'm still not all the way back yet. But speaking of Invincible, I was in an Invincible chat with It's Lit Book Reviews. Have a great time. I do a lot of stuff with them. Awesome guys over there at their channel. We do a Wheel of Time series that we've got going on. We're going to keep doing Invincible, and then, I'm sure we'll do other stuff because we always have a great time. I was in another collaboration video with Preacher from Preacher Reads, and we talked about self-pub stuff that you should read if you're skeptical of self-published stuff. I don't know. There was a bunch of people on that one, so if you're curious about self-published, or if you want just some self-published book recommendations, definitely go over there. You can see what I picked and what other people picked. Also, I am in a BookTube Fantasy Football League. I'm currently really sucking in that league, and it doesn't help that my CeeDee Lamb just got hurt and is going to be out for a couple weeks. So like that was, somebody who I figured would put up a lot of points for me every week is now going to be out. So yeah, that sucks. And so we'll see there, but that's with a bunch of people. Chris from The Bearded Book Beast is really the one kind of like spearheading that one, but there's, a bunch of people in there. Chance Dillon's in there, Brian from BellTube's in there. There's a bunch of authors and everybody. I'd have to pull out the list to see everybody who's in there because there's no way I can remember. I think, is there 12 of us, 10 of us? It doesn't matter. There's a decent number of us in there. So yeah, I think we're gonna do maybe like quarterly or every 4 weeks, get together and try to talk about it. We did do a video at some point that I was on for a live stream for our draft. If you're interested in fantasy football, maybe keep an eye out for that. I'll obviously talk about it as we go. And then obviously the biggest thing that, is outside of the books and everything is I went on a trip to Ireland. It was absolutely spectacular. We flew into Dublin and went straight to Cork, so Dublin is in the east side of Ireland, and then went straight to Cork in the south. We're there for about a day or so. Took the train there, took the train from Cork all the way to Galway, got yelled at one of the train stations in Limerick, which was just kind of hilarious. Basically, we looked at the board and it said, row 4 or whatever for where the train is. And so, we walked through the very opened gate and everything to the 4th train along with somebody else, an Irishman. So it wasn't just, us being dumb Americans not knowing how the train works, even though that was kind of true. And we, get onto the train and are sitting there. It's about 15 minutes or so before the train is supposed to leave. And all of a sudden, some guy comes on and is like, get off, get your stuff and get off. And then, was like telling us what we did wrong and stuff. And I was just like, I'm not the one who left the gate open. I don't know. But then anyway, we were in Galway, which we went to Cliffs of Moher, some islands, just all kinds of stuff. And it was, some of the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen in my entire life. Oh, I forgot to say in Cork, we did like the Blarney Castle, Blarney Stone, and all of that stuff, which is, I'll maybe put a picture of up, like you can kiss this, like on the outside, it's like on the castle, you like kiss the stone and stuff. It's like, urban legend kind of stuff for that. But then, yeah, the Cliffs of Moher went on just, some of the most beautiful scenery I've seen. I could totally live out in Galway, in County Clare, out in that region. It was absolutely beautiful. And then came back to Dublin, went to the Steelers versus Vikings game, which was just, like I said, said in the beginning of this video, I mean, easily the best sporting event I've ever been to in my life. The game obviously went my way, which made it better. I maybe wouldn't feel as great about it if we had lost, but, just the people around us were great. We had great seats. Just everything about it was spectacular. I had my first Guinness ever at that game. And I mean, it's blasphemy to say, but Guinness, I mean, is it better in Dublin? Yeah, it's better. It's still bad. I mean, I still don't like it, which is, blasphemy, I guess, to, for a lot of people. But then hung out in Dublin for a day or two and then flew home. And yeah, it was just an absolutely amazing trip. So I'm sure I'll have thrown some pictures up as I was talking and everything. And then I did only buy one book while we were there. We did go to a bunch of bookstores and everything in a bunch of places and, all kinds of things. But this is, technically, this is not the American version of this. This is of Ants and Dinosaurs by Cixin Liu, who, wrote The Three-Body Problem and stuff. And this is a standalone that I read. I think I read it earlier this year. Maybe it was last year. But it's actually called The Cretaceous Past here in the States is what they call it. And it's basically this sci-fi series of like, there was probably intelligent life it takes the idea that there was intelligent life before humans, and it has ants and dinosaurs be intelligent and like create a society and stuff together. It's really cool, really kind of far out there, a little dry, but I had a lot of fun with it when I read it. And this is the first time I'd ever seen it in print anywhere. So I was like, I have to get it. And I got it from a bookstore in Dublin, which was just super cool. So yeah, even though I'm not going to read anything out of it because, you know, I've already read it, it's just really cool to have that edition. And now that I bought it, I'm sure I'll see it all over the place here back in the States. So yeah, that was, you know, just a little life random stuff outside of BookTube. But then to wrap up today's video, we're going to do the author spotlight. So I'm going to have to get my notes, and we have a couple different author things to spotlight and talk about, including a Kickstarter, which is kind of cool. So definitely forgive me as I read here off the iPad, but we're going to start out with S.J. Schenck, The Connive of Graves. All right, now definitely stick with me because reading right now with my current level of sleep and brain is probably going to be a rough one. But it starts out with The Connives of Graves. Jeppo loathes his hometown and he can scarcely tolerate the townsfolk. Mostly he despises his life as a gravedigger. He went to the academy in the south after all, and he was never meant to pick up his father's shovel. When a wicked sorcerer arrives at his gate demanding the bones of the local saint, Jeppo has no objections in principle, but he fears the wrath of the night hag, to whom he has been selling corpses for years. Interesting. Jeppo must choose the lesser of two evils and do so quickly. The spiraling feud threatens to spill innocent blood, and worse still, his darkest secrets. Next up is The Last Light of Edgewood. And I'm going to get these characters' names wrong, but for even in Orin, life in Edgewood has been simple. The realm of the royal garden had always known centuries of unbroken peace. But as even is chosen to be the apprentice to the mysterious and reclusive keeper of the light, the shadow begins to appear. Things in Edgewood are not as they seem. And then last up, we have a Kickstarter, and this is Larry Correia's American Paladin Kickstarter. A bunch of, you know, crazy stats. I think it funded in like 45 seconds. It's already almost at, I think it's at, when I checked last, $227,000. It's a graphic novel for his new series. I haven't read any of Larry Correia yet, but he is an author I would like to. I think the Saga of Forgotten Warriors is one that I would like to get to at some point from him. It sounds interesting, and I've heard it's like a thriller fantasy almost, which sounds great as somebody who really likes thrillers and stuff. I think it would be a series that I like, but I'll have links to all of that down below in the description if you haven't heard of any of it or are interested in any of that from my very poor reading there. That was bad, even by my standards. But that is all for me. September, like I said, crazy month, all of that fun stuff. Definitely let me know what you read, anything you did, all that fun stuff down below in the comments, or as always, the Discord that is linked in the description as well. But that's all for me. And remember, read what you want when you want.